Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's high noon on the West Coast in Seattle. We're GMT -7. It's mid-afternoon on the East Coast. It's early evening over in Dublin. I know you're on. My friend. And it's very early in the morning over in Asia. It's 5 a.m. in Sydney. So thank you for joining us from Australia. Believe it or not, people do join us from Australia. We appreciate it. So it's very early tomorrow morning in Australia. Good news is it's your Friday. Hang on, everybody. Before I get going, let me just do one thing. Alexa, off. Okay, I just have to turn off my Amazon Echo so we can stay focused on today's topic. So let me go into presenter mode, and we'll jump right into it, folks. So this is the MSP Merger and Acquisition Series over the summer from SMB Nation. This is a community webinar today, and it's content-based. We're talking about the sell side. I'm on the agenda slide, folks, and we're going to treat this as an unwebinar, if you will. You've heard of the concept of unconference. I want this to be an unwebinar, and by that I mean the following, that we really want your interaction. I have a funny suspicion, and I'm going to talk with the team afterwards, but we have a lot of content to cover. And unfortunately, I do need to end at 1 p.m. Pacific today, so I have a feeling that next week, if there's enough interest, we could have a Q&A session, actually have an opening next week at this point. So I'm kind of thinking that's where I'm going to take it, but that was the intent, was to make it an hour of free consulting, but we do have a lot of content. It's all about positioning your exit to ensure you maximize your potential and profit. And with that said, I want to go ahead and introduce Tim Carlson, who's on the line. And Tim has joined SMB Nation to help us, quite frankly, help you in terms of growing your MSP practice. And he brings an illustrious background. Tim, a lot of people don't know you, so first introduce yourself, and then let's talk about that last point about maximizing profit and so on. Go ahead, Tim.
So, hey, thank you, Harry. I appreciate that. The postcard background on my career really is, it's basically financial services meets technology sales. Meaning that out of college, I wound up in the financial services space for names you might recognize. I worked for a bond trading desk that was ultimately purchased by Goldman. I was lucky enough to work for Dean Witter, then Fidelity Investments, and then the business of investment banking brought me to the Seattle area, where I was a technology research analyst for a venture capital firm. It sounds far more interesting than it was. Then we also did a lot of sell-side investment banking for tech firms in the region. And so I have the misfortune or the fortunate set of background experiences which allows me to understand a little bit about how the financial community tends to like to work, as well as how to sell and how to position technology. So Harry has asked me to join forces with him in order to help us sort through your strategies, your growth strategies, your exit strategies, or just your strategies as it relates to what's changing in our marketplace. We like to say, if you're not, you're either startup or starting over with the way technology has moved around a little bit. And so we're here to help. That's the way you should think about it.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into it, folks. Like I say, we have a lot of content. And Tim, offhand, if we were to do more Q&A next week, is your schedule in pretty good shape for next week? I haven't even asked you this. Okay.
Absolutely. What was I supposed to say? No way.
Yeah, exactly. Today we're talking about the sell side, folks. A lot of you attended the buy side. So we did the buy side 2 months ago. It was a little while ago we did the buy side, and we're back with the sell side by popular demand. And so we're repeating a couple of concepts because we have a lot of new people on the webinar today. It's a large crowd. So we have put on your party dress, which is exactly what it sounds like, to put your best foot forward. That could be the theme of this webinar, so I'm going to just leave that statement as it stands. But reviewed financial with a rev matrix. Tim, we want to talk about 10 goes to 2x6 and reviewed financials. Go for it.
So the idea behind rev matrix, and at first maybe it seems like a confusing thing to say, but every business has a unique revenue stream. And so what I like to think about is understanding where it all comes from. By example, we do a really good job of selling managed services. We do a great job of consulting. We are really the best help desk in town. We have we have the ability to build custom hardware. We do a wonderful job in troubleshooting security issues. Whatever it is that you do well, you need to thoroughly understand how that revenue blends into the total picture, and that's the easy part. The other thing that I think people should look really, really hard at is once you've decided what your revenue streams are, and I like to see the dotted line back to where the business came from. Here's what I mean. I was speaking with an entrepreneur about a month ago about this, and the thing that came out of the conversation, Harry, was that I really get juicy consulting engagements, one after the other, it seems. And I asked him, well, so how are you pulling that off? And it turns out he's in one of those, networking CEO, Chamber of Commerce groups, and he gets to answer questions from time to time, and that just leads to, ongoing high-end consulting engagements for him. So my point to everyone is to understand where the business comes from that attaches to your sub-revenue vertical. Meaning, we just seem to get a lot of coverage because the website. Social media is where we're seeing a lot of our new business come from. Referrals. Be able to articulate what part of the sales and marketing function is also generating those matrixed revenues. It'll help you further understand and explain your business. So the next point.
10 goes to 2x6.
Yeah. So one of the things that's important, again, is packaging. And almost everybody has a number of things that they need to accomplish. So this was a rule that we used to follow when we were raising money for technology companies. We wanted to be able to make sure that the investors recognized, the private equity investors recognized, the business, the management team was serious about getting what needs to be done. So this was what we used to say. In an afternoon, do not make this a longer project than it needs to be. List out the top 10 things that you think your business really needs that doesn't have today. And that can be, we need more space. We need to upgrade our office equipment. We need, whatever it is, everyone knows that wherever you're at, there's 10 things that you need to do to improve the way your company's running and or look and feel, new website, that sort of thing. And then pick 2 and then absolutely nail them within the first 6 months. Get them done. That way, you can take the next 2 on your list and get those done in the next 6 months. And those are the kinds of things that you need to do as a demonstrated discipline to better, Harry likes to say party dress, to make sure that you're ready to go. And because it's important. And so that's how we think about that. And I know it's kind of a weird way to say it. I asked Harry if it meant anything to him, and he said no. So I hope it was helpful and not confusing. And then the next point.
How do we get to 6? So help me get to. You got me to 10, and then it goes.
Yeah, list of 10, and then pick 2, and then get those 2 done by the 6-month mark.
Okay.
And that gives you 6 months to get the next 2 on the list of 10 that may have changed, by the way, but.
Okay.
That's really crucial because everyone has these things that sit on the to-do list laying out there. And if you get them out of the way, again, you just simply become that much more attractive.
Yeah, I call it the upper left drawer. That you
Yes.
know that letter. You know that we're all small business owners on this call, and you know that letter you don't want to open, and you put it in the upper left drawer of your desk, and you think it's going to go away. There's a little bit of that in all of us, so I get it.
All right.
Tim, I want to talk about the next point.
Sure.
What's different or better? Why us? Differentiation.
Yep. So as a result of a lot of the work that we started to do when we rolled this service out, I've had the fortunate opportunity to talk to probably 50 different small business owners at this point in detail, not just hi, how are you, but a little bit about what they do and how they do it. And what I'm noticing is not everyone I'm speaking with can clearly articulate what they do best, okay, or what makes them better. And what I mean by that is at top of mind or at the tip of your tongue, you should be able to say, we do the best. We have the best help desk, period. We have a vertical specialty. We are very price competitive. We're in a great location. I have probably the best customized product stack. We nail security. Whatever it is, it's really important to be able to articulate it quickly and then point back to it in the organization as evidence. And the other thing with the why us part is it also isn't just about what the company nails or what they do best. It's also who does it best on your team, meaning I have absolutely the best help desk team. I absolutely have the best salespeople. Be able to understand clearly, with no rose-colored glasses, understand clearly what you're doing really well and live there and spend a lot more time being prepared to communicate what that's all about.
Yeah, and what I would say in the case of SMB Nation is I have my wrap when I'm trying to engage in the revenue side of SMB Nation, and I say, two things. Two things I think make us different and hopefully better is that one is for integrated media company, which is, I'll call that our current business model. We're always exploring new directions. In fact, we'll get to that a little bit later in the in the presentation, but we're technical. And so, Tim, this weekend I actually had a consultant teaching me some HTML stuff to make the newsletter look better on Sundays, our Sunday paper, because I had a case of wonky font, right? I, reused the template. I reused the template, and it shifted to Arial from Calibria. I mean, yeah, I had wonky font. And he said, basically you got to hand code it, bro. You can do all the template stuff you want, the GUI stuff you want, but here, just give me an hour and let me train you on HTML. So that number one, my staff and I are technical, and then number two, we will not send out a direct solicitation to our community. So you are not going to get an email that is a true advertisement. Now we do need support to keep the doors open, and we do, like the New York Times, Tim, we do sell advertisements in our Sunday paper. I don't deny that.
I got it.
The New York Times is not going to send out a direct solicitation. They have a covenant with their readership, and we feel the same. So let's move on.
So add one more point
no, go ahead,
too, in reference to what's different or better. One of the ways to get to that sometimes, because sometimes, when you're in the middle of the battle and you're working every day and you're running things and you're spending your Saturdays, I had a conversation with a woman who does this almost on a 6-month period with her team. She asks each employee why they still work there. And, it can be a little uncomfortable at first, but it's interesting because, why are your people showing up and staying and working hard? And the reason could be, I pay better. We have this great profit sharing plan. It's flex hours. It's free lunches. It doesn't matter. But one of the things that really is important to understand, because remember, in an acquisition, merger, partnership, it's going to be as important to get the cultures right as it is to get the math right. So knowing your culture and making sure that you can articulate, hey, let me tell you, these people work hard, but I don't micromanage anybody, and they run a flex hour shift. That may be completely different or not anywhere close to expectation of new arrangement. So you've got to have your head around that stuff. That was the only other point I wanted to make on that, Harry.
Yeah, no problem. So expectation management. We actually, Tim, we do a better job of talking about that in a couple of slides about head and heart and all that. So I'm going to, it's just as it sounds, expectation management. And then gotchas will be exposed. What I'm talking about here, and we're going to talk about this again in a couple of slides, due diligence, but here's what I mean. It's on surface. Gotchas are going to be exposed. So for example, everyone on this call, part of the benefit of owning your small business is that Nikon camera that you love and adore and use as a hobby, but also for work. It's those kind of things that we all do. It's the Nikon camera. It's the boat that has the name First Draw on it down at the marina. It's what we've all done, and quite frankly, you can view it as almost part of your compensation or your contribution for being an owner. But those kind of things can be a discussion point, like what's with car, what's with condo, what's with boat. Those kind of things are going to come up. So, we could go on and on and on, but Tim, I'm sure you've seen it 100 times where it's kind of like, what? What's he got?
Well, I mean, again, it's okay, right? It's my name's on the door. I make the payroll, and I signed a personal guarantee for the note that got this place, and I leased all the equipment. So it doesn't really matter. Just know that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the big white notebook. But just know that all that stuff needs to be organized and ready to discuss. And it may come.
And I would offer disclosed. You don't want surprise.
Yeah, well, fair enough. And I think it's important that in these acquisition, merger, partnership arrangements, most likely in businesses of this size and category, the way it works best is over an earn-out. Okay, and so the earn-out period may or may not be. It's more likely going to be longer than a year. So over the course of 1 to 3 years, let's just say, those things are going to be. You do not want to create a material problem for something that is your long-term exit strategy. So just think that through and manage it.
Yeah, and I'll tell a funny contrarian story. Where a really good friend of mine over in the telecom sector was involved in a merger of his company with a larger company. In the larger company, they were not nice people, and it didn't work out culturally, and I don't think anybody felt good about it emotionally, but money was involved. And so apparently one fine day, sometime late, I think it was the bank call. I'm going to get the story a little wrong, but I'll make my point, is that they called up and said, well, what do you want us to do with this $44,000 that's sitting here in savings? And they had not discovered the $44,000, and it wasn't because my guy hid it. It was just, Tim, is a big deal, and those things happen. And he kind of looked to the left, and he looked to the right, and he thought about it, and he said, I'll stop by and pick up the check. Because he had a dog in the fight.
Sure.
It's a funny story. Now, I'm in no way suggesting you do such things, folks, but it is a funny story. And Tim, I'm sure you've got a couple of those stories from Cascadia Capital and some of the work you've done.
Well, it's normal course of life, and the thing is that it has the potential to unravel what was the bigger picture and the bigger win. And And Harry, as much as we have some of our own anecdotal stories, we work at this level. What we provide, we think, is the first wave of getting you prepared to again, merge, be acquired, and/or partnership. And then we have affiliations with organizations that are better equipped to do a deeper dive as you get larger in size or continue on. So all of these things need to be scraped out early so that you have the ability to quickly continue to grow and or acquire if that's the other side of the coin. So our job is really sort of a little bit of freshman year is kind of how it feels to me. We know who and we know who we trust for the handoff as things go on. So just know we spent too much time on this now, but just know that
actually, that's a good transition. I'm on the next sales side slide, so you're actually kind of weaving into some of this. So let's take it in order. The first one is discover how to value your business. So let's talk about that.
Well, it's going to be revenue based, and there's more. There's 6 or 7 probably different graduate school calculations that are going to be invoked to determine value. Top line revenue. Well, that's difficult because it's going to be margin sensitive. Trailing, forward, comparative. The idea is that all of it needs to come together, and the parties on both sides need to think about it the same. So whatever equation you're using to determine value, then both companies should use the same calculation, in my opinion. And that way there's at least algebra that got a value created. And, in some cases, if it's an acquisition, it's not required. But if you're going to continue on and it's a merger or something else like that, then determining what you brought to the table and your new percentage of ownership, there's math involved. And it's important to recognize that going in, that it just needs to be completely agreed to first. That saves so many extra hours of discussion and frankly a lot of revs that aren't necessary if you get to the negotiation part too soon, and you've got your consultants looking after you like they're supposed to, maybe even attorneys who are over negotiating because there isn't a consensus or an agreement or at least a reasonable framework for doing the math on value. So you got to get that right early.
Yep. And I would add 2 more points. There's a little bit of the concept in values or beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, that's why this area is very interesting. That's why you ask, why did Microsoft pay what they did for Nokia, what they almost paid for Yahoo, good Lord, and then what they paid for LinkedIn? And that leads to my next point, actually, is that some acquisitions, not so much at the MSP level, but in a different realm, they can be strategic in nature where, there's certainly the financial, the capitalization of income to value. There's certainly that. But then there's strategic acquisition. And for the purposes of today, Tim, I'd say that statement speaks for itself because that's not necessarily the audience we're talking to, unless you'd like to comment on that. But there's kind of 2 components to value in my eyes.
There's no question about it. And the problem is that you can't possibly think about your business in the, under $5 million in revenue is just not going to carry a multiple anywhere close to even the unprofitable companies that somehow magically still make it out into the public markets. And we've all seen this, right? They're head scratchers. You've got some maybe cool idea social media thing that hasn't had a profitable quarter yet, and it goes public for $300 million. Well, it's obviously trading on something other than historic revenue, and that just doesn't happen on the low end. And so, those expectations need to hit the window because you're not going to get that, and it's not conceivable that you'll find that in an acquirer. So, like it or not, I think that's where this marketplace trades. All of that, however, the better, and I'm going to let you describe this because I think you do a better job than I do, the business of preparing for due diligence and creating the big notebook. We have a point of view on this one, and it's a little bit out of experience that you went through in 2007. So maybe describing those 2 points.
Yeah, I will. But Tim,
okay.
let me do this first. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping. We've had some people join the webinar after we got underway. So, folks, it's the weekly webinar from SMB Nation. This is the MSP Merger and Acquisition series that we're doing over the summer. This is actually the second installment, and this is the sell side. Great audience. So I think we're on to something in terms of the conversation. On the SMB Nation calendar, if you are in the Puget Sound area this afternoon at 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. is our 16th annual picnic. Usually, 50 people. I think we once had 100 back in the day, but 50 of us get together. Tim, it's supposed to be 94 this afternoon, but with a wind in the shade. And Steve Banks from the Puget Sound Small Business Server User Group is bringing his group over, and Charles Keating with the West Sound Technology Professionals are coming over. Check out our webpage if at all you would like to make it. You do need to register for our head count. And then next week, I think I'm going to be able to bring together another webinar for maybe an hour of Q&A on M&A. We'll keep you posted on that. It's just an idea I have. And then we're about 6 weeks out, Tim, from the Tour to Cloud. So 9 cities in the fall. The topic is Azure. The topic is Office 365 with a little bit of Windows 10 thrown in. So go to tourtocloud.com. Several new cities like Detroit and Columbus, Ohio. So we're pretty psyched. So those are the announcements. It's midpoint during the webinar. So we're going to talk about preparing for due diligence and creating the big notebook. One is you should do it now, okay? Because I've gone through some M&A activity on a couple of fronts, and in 2007, we were approached by a much larger media organization to acquire us, and unfortunately, the recession hit. That whole department lost their job, and worse yet, that company went through a bankruptcy. So. Still can't decide if the stars were on my side or not on that one, Tim. But we went through the whole process, and what I found was A, it took a lot of time. B, how unprepared I was because I'm just busy running a business that I really enjoy. The business of business. And so, Tim, the funny story is, and then I'll let you talk about maybe the contents of the notebook, but the funny story was I literally took about a half a day off, drove down to Olympia, our state capital, and got some copies of our, corporate seal and our articles of incorporation and all this stuff. I mean, it literally drove down, did it, and drove home and put it in a notebook. But let's talk about that big notebook because, Tim, before I hand off, here's the point, gang. You might do it now. It's August. It's fishing season. Maybe it's a little slow the next 2 weeks. You might do it between Thanksgiving and New Year's. But once you do it, it's done. So it can be used again. That was the really cool thing about going through it was, well, this deal didn't work out for us, but man, we're ready to go, and we're going to be very impressive. Back to the party dress, we're going to be very impressive when they start due diligence and we get everything to them by Friday. I mean, are you kidding me? It's all here. Tim, go for it.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things, and some of the, as I mentioned earlier, vaguely, because I didn't want to name any of our colleagues that do this as well at the higher levels. It's not uncommon to hear stories about my best customer isn't under a contract. They pay every month. It's never been any different than that. And, we're in year 8. They're staying with us because they love us. And it's like, well, but you're out of contract. So in the big notebook, you want to have all of the, licenses and all those things that Harry just described, but you also want to have some of what I talked about earlier, which is all of your service agreements, all of your obligations, and you want it in such a way that you can walk into a boardroom with 2 copies, or a conference room. Boardroom sounds a little too serious, and be able to go through it with the acquirer, partner, merger candidate, whatever, without having to send countless versions of attachments on email with, kind of private material bouncing all over the internet. I think it makes a lot more sense to have it all neatly organized and on it, in and under your arm, and you can go through that together. Maybe you leave a copy, maybe you don't, but getting it there, and as Harry said, looking like someone they might want to keep around because of your organizational skills and or the way in which you could get deliverables done on time, creates value. It's creating value. And so a lot of it doesn't change after it's in place either. It has some shelf life, which is the other thing. So do it in August. Well, August is over, but you know what I'm saying? You need to have that done because there's no getting around it, with no going forward really without it.
Yeah, and remember we said values in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
This is the kind of thing that could create value. I was coached by experts, and that's one of our next points. But as I was coached by experts in 2007, it was kind of described as sort of a sliding scale evaluation, that they're probably going to offer. They take you out to the proverbial steak dinner late in the negotiations, and they claim they found all these problems, kind of like a home inspection right before closing on a home. we found we found moisture in the basement and this and that, and you got to be prepared for that. But their point was, by being organized, by being impressive, Harry, it could be several $100,000 more in what they'll pay. I mean, seriously, Tim.
Yeah, no, it's worthy work, considering, right? It's hard to run the business anyway, and then add one more thing like this to it. So on those list of 10 things, you may say, I think I found one of my 2, and it's this. You'll decide. We add value here, and I think this is a little bit about how we describe a little bit about how we are approaching potential acquisition, merger, partnerships. It's a result of 15 years of accumulating like-minded business people who are, in many cases, at that point, I've got to figure out how to transition away from and or towards the golf course, whatever that may look like for you. So do you want to kind of describe how we're doing this, Harry, and that way people understand? And what's important to remember here, that the thing I'm hoping that you'll remember to, because there's 2 ways of thinking about your business value. One is potentially regionally, and the other is vertical specialty. So thinking with those 2 ideas in mind, walk us through how you and I have been doing that this year for people.
Well, let me hold that thought on either geography or verticalization. I want to come back to that in a different way, but let me tell you why we're on this call today. Is that this is actually kind of our 3rd merger and acquisition webinar, even though we call it the 2nd. And here's why. And I'd have to look at our calendar, but I'm going to say it was March or April when I had, I believe it was my quarterly report, my analyst report. I just had one 2 weeks ago, had 387 attendees on it. And so, Tim, I have a quarterly report. And a big part of that report was consolidation, some trends I'm seeing, some things I think you should be doing. Well, after that webinar, we were not only solicited by a handful of attendees, like, well, can SMB Nation help me with this? And Tim, you and I were already in talks about that, but we kind of bumped into this business model as one often does, and we said, well, sure. I mean, we're a startup, and I've been through a couple deals, and Tim, you most certainly have. So between us, we got the right mix. That led to webinar number 2, and again, I believe that was late May. And then now we're on the 3rd webinar, and we've gotten more and more specific. So what we've done is, quite frankly, at the request of the community, we started to offer some services. We'll talk about that now in the next slide. But it's been well received. Now, and part of that is, Tim, approaching potential buyers. We have painstakingly not only built up a customer list of MSPs, CSPs, computer guys, resellers, consultants, and so on, but then I've been very transparent, but we took about the first 6 months of this year to really engage in analytics and clean that up, and boy howdy, that was exercise and overlays and things I don't even want to tell my mother about, but we did. We got dynamics all cleaned up. We came in at about 61,000 names, and so all of a sudden we have resources. And so when we were asked to help, and we're working with currently 3 clients, when we were asked to help, like where could they find a potential buyer, or in another case, where could they find a potential acquisition candidate? We do that. We help with approaching that, and that ties very closely to the next conversation about retaining experts and avoiding business brokers, and with all due respect, but maybe calculator sites where you plug in the numbers and you get your own valuation and blah blah blah. But Tim, why don't we talk about that? But I'm still going to come back to, well, we can weave in geography and
Sure.
verticalization.
So the point is really pretty simple. Since we started, we had 2 agendas immediately with some of your peers. The conversations were around acquisition targets and how to source those. Those calls were made, follow-on conversations were set up, and the pool of interested companies tripled for us in about 120 days. And so I would tell you that, and everything is under non-disclosure, that's how we do it, but I would tell you that we have 4 separate companies now, all with slightly different agendas. One definitely more in line with acquisition. The other next 2 I would think about are looking for the right merger partner to double in size. And then the final one is certainly in the final approach on career, mid-60s, and has told me every call that he needs to be a better golfer, but he would like to fade out over a period of time in some sort of asset sale. So what we realize is that by listening first and then thinking about what the goals are, we can then help in this big community of Harrys find something that potentially works. And that's really what we do. We want to do that early first, and we want to help you get ready before you turn the negotiation over to your hired professional, I'm going to say legal or someone else. We want to make sure that the culture fit is going to work. There's nothing worse than having to unravel an asset set. Well, there might be something worse. I can think about people running for office as an example. But the net of it is, you want to get those things in and out of the way.
Resist, but I would throw a divorce. I overlay a divorce on top of an acquisition, and I can think of something worse, brother.
So with that said, without overdoing the point being that get this stuff done and ready and organized before you engage someone to start writing your term sheet. That's not the first move. It just isn't. And so, and that is also this business of separating heart from mind, in my opinion. And I got this from a conversation we had last week with, one of the people we're working really closely with. And it was an interesting comment in that she had mentioned, what she really actually still enjoys doing the most is tip of the sword, face-to-face sales calls. Just likes to go out and, shake the hand. And then they're working in a vertical. So it's it's the medical vertical. And what the frustration was that when your name's on the door, you spend a little too much time working on payroll and accounts receivable and just the effort it takes to run the business. And, in her perfect world, it was about, if I could spend the next 2 or 3 years just doing sales work and turn the rest of it off or over to somebody, that would be a great end. And so you got to find that place in your head and your heart first, because that's going to be what you're going to have to communicate in that conversation while you're thinking about putting cultures together. And there's no wrong answer, by the way, and that's the cool part about it. It's just good fits. So I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, and then I have a slightly different take that why Harry is not a residential real estate broker like our friend Matt Makowitz, who, Tim, Matt, but what you may not know is Matt was a published author in the MSP community. He was an MSP in New Jersey. He's bought and sold practices, quite well respected, was a business coach, and then Matt moved on. And that's absolutely fine. He's a successful broker on Bainbridge Island. And a day doesn't go by where I don't see a smiling face on a sign.
Sign somewhere, right?
But what Matt contends with, by the way, I'm assuming we'll see Matt tonight at the picnic, but what Matt contends with is emotional purchases, emotional sales. It's residential real estate. Versus on the business side, and again, I now feel qualified to talk about mergers and acquisitions on the business side. I don't know if emotion, yes, there's emotion and there's always the entrepreneur and the founder, but I don't know if emotion's the first word that comes to mind, Tim, as I've seen some VC-backed deals. I don't know if I would say the VCs are especially emotional. I have other words for VCs, and because there's women and children on the line, I would say there are some that are not nice people. But you get the point. You get the point I'm trying to make, is that some of these guys are spreadsheet jockeys. Man, they're not emotional. This is what they do, Tim. And I'm drawing huge contrast to make my point, right? All the way from the housewife and the husband buying a house, all the way to the spreadsheet jockey. But there is, I don't know. There's a point in there somewhere about keeping your cool in these negotiations.
Yeah, right. And again, the banking community, the VCs, and the private equity guys, they have math that's different because they usually deal with size. So we're in the micro market. And so any of the things that they would typically do from a spreadsheet to create value or to perceive value really aren't that relevant in this space. In my opinion, under a couple $1 million in revenue on an annualized basis, we won't run into them. But the point is, they're running somebody else's money, and therefore their agenda is always going to be different, whereas your agenda as the acquired, the merger partner, or the partnership is that it's that future organization that's going to provide you with your livelihood. And so think through what it is you intend to do best, because it will be different, and make sure that you're concentrating on the value you can add. And then I would dare say, make sure that the key people that are on your team absolutely understand what they're going to be doing going forward, because that's going to be part of what you brought to the party, and you can't have people storming out the door.
Yep.
So you got to have that right, and you better get to it early, or you're going to waste a lot of time, and you will spend some money on legal for something that didn't work. So that's enough. I don't want to be scary, but you see it enough time, and they're called train wrecks, and that's because that's what they like. So we would like to help avoid as much of that as is possible, which is why I'll let you do the commercial for hiring us and what we have left to
Yeah,
offer for
yeah,
the
yeah. No,
remainder.
we'll
But
get to that. We'll get to that in a minute. But
okay.
I want to add value that I got together with an old time Microsoft guy. Moved to Bainbridge Island, by the way. Was on the original small business server dev team back in '99, 2000. So last night, Tim, we got together. He bought me a dark and stormy. We're sitting out on a patio. It's fantastic. And he's looking at retirement from Microsoft. The years have gone by, and he's expensive, and he's probably got a bullseye on his back in the new Microsoft culture. So he's thinking retirement. We both got kids in college, and so he was kind of like, now think about it, Harry. Have you ever heard of a student loan? Yeah. Have you ever heard of a retirement loan? No. And he said, your son, my daughter, they have 30 to 40 years of work ahead of them, right? So, I mean, I know, we all want to pay for the kids' college and, yada, 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 but there is nothing called a retirement loan. And Tim, the point I'm making is that for the demographic on this phone call, I resemble that remark, and that this is your retirement. For a lot of people, the exit is your retirement. So, take this an additional $300,000 can make a hell of a difference, man.
Yeah, I have a friend in the business who often said, if you intend to live indoors, right, you need to do a good job of retirement planning. So.
So, Tim, finally, on the much more slide, then, folks, we're going to get to some other levels of detail, but on the much more, I'm sorry, same slide, but it says and much more. Why don't we quickly check off on the geography versus the vertical markets? We probably actually left that conversation behind, but let's circle back to it one more time about what kind of what kind of player you are and what kind of asset you can be to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, oversimplifying again, we're doing this currently. In one case, the entity has established themselves in the great state. Well, I won't even say, but they're well established in a region, and they are looking to get to the coast. And so the services they offer, they understand how to sell in their location, and what they're looking for is a similar set of skills and services that are, in the Southern California area, as an example, because they see that as the direction they would like to grow. The other argument is that, we are really, really good at security, and we think that it's ubiquitously required everywhere. So I want to find like-minded entrepreneurs that are really good at delivering security as we are. And I want to stay, that's going to be what we do well. It's our bell cow. So help me find those oriented, those orientations. The third is I do this well. We do consulting well. We do managed services well. But don't do managed print, and I don't do help desk, and I don't do custom hardware. And I feel like those things would be marvelous to round out our offering. Help me find what I don't have. And so, any one of those combinations is really how we go about, looking around the SMB nation after we've had the deep dive discussion about what makes sense, to see if we can help you locate that and do it in such a way that the signal to noise ratio is not exhausting or intimidating.
Okay, so folks, I'm on my collaborate slide, and I want to talk about the business model that Tim and I have teamed up on. And there's a whole story here. Tim's been in, most recently, a couple different startups in downtown Seattle. Likewise, I've been involved in a couple, and we found ourselves on the same ferry commuting in, and one thing led to another. So essentially, though, based on your inquiries, we have an M&A service. And So we have a package where we package you up on the sell side for $3,995. We now have clients, and we have a track record, and even a reference account. That's a gentleman that's happy to go public, public-private. On private phone calls, he'll go public. I'll put it that way. But gentlemen who can speak to the services we provide. What we would like to do, though, is because we are in the first year of building this practice, we are happy if you sign up before the end of August to offer that for roughly $2,000 or half price to carry us out through the rest of the year. We have capacity for 5 more clients at that rate. And that kind of gets us booked with everything else we have going on. And so it's an opportunity to invest in yourself and come out of it with your party dress on. And then we can even help with the buyer location process. So we're happy to take 5 more on. And then as a bonus, what I'd like to do is offer those 5, the next 5 that sign up, the opportunity to walk out with an UMA Office HD business class phone system. Complete transparency, that's from another promotion we did. We have some left over in the warehouse. But Tim, here's the deal. That's worth $250. And there is nothing like HD voice in this world of people trying to, snap, crackle, pop on mobile phones and do business. And
right?
there's a time and a place for an HD desk phone, let me tell you. And if you don't need it, I get that. Give it to one of your good customers. Give them a love tap. That's kind of what my thought was. Is here's a chance to look over your portfolio, maybe a not-for-profit that could benefit from that, and just give it to them as a love tap. So the way you'll do this is you'll want to reach out to Tim personally. So Tim C is in cat. So TIMC at smbnation.com. One way to remember that is his name is Tim Carlson, so Tim C at smbnation.com. I'm going to make mention of this in the thank you note for all the webinar attendees. But Tim, I've kind of shown the offer and the incentive. If you don't mind backfilling in terms of the work that we perform, if you could go a layer deeper on that.
So I would love to. However, it is 12:55, and I'm thinking just out of sheer courtesy, we ought to just open it up to questions. Sure. On an individual basis, I can go through with the offering menu, but the idea is that if you're serious about being acquired, merging, or permanent partnership, then we'll have a conversation that's personal,
okay,
or related to your business. But I'm wondering if there's any questions out there that
there are.
We do. Okay.
There are, and Jenny Hallmark over in the control booth has already answered a couple of them. Thank you, Jenny. And the questions were about a recording of the webinar and slides, and the answer is yes and yes. We have a Karatzi. Oh, that's John out of Chicago. Tim, I'm not going to use last names because here again, I think the nature of this webinar is, confidentiality. We have Richard. Do the M&A services include consulting during an engagement? Richard's asking that. And Richard, I would say, well, yes, inherently so. That's what we're doing, is providing services. And if you wouldn't mind reaching out to Tim for a one-on-one on kind of the specifics that we've done for the other customers that we have, the other clients that we have, he could kind of walk through the nature of those services. But Tim, I hope you'll concur, but we very much are providing consulting. I mean, that's how we add value.
No, there's no question about it. And, you think about an upfront retainer, you blow through those very, very quickly if you count hours. So the point being that there's an end in mind, and so it wouldn't be valuable enough, Harry, if we said, oh, okay, you ready to go? Good. Here's a list of people in your neighborhood. Give them a call. All right. None of that's going to happen because that's not going to work. What works is, so far what works, let's not get over our skis here, is what we've been able to do this year and kind of proven it to ourselves and our clients. And I'll tell you that the reception has been it's just been positive. I mean,
Oh yeah,
even when the
yeah,
answer's not interested, you know, no harm, no foul. It seems to be the way this community works, and so that's rewarding. But absolutely, we're there, and at some point we'll have to get out of the way when legal takes over. But you know, that's the whole point of getting all this right first and making sure the fit is there, so that that doesn't turn into a ping pong match.
yeah.
Because then it just takes the fun out of it. So we want to avoid as much of it as possible.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, folks, I'll take one more question. I take ownership here. I didn't do a great job, Tim, of setting up the Q&A format for this webinar. And Chinny, if you could make a note, I want to think about next Thursday just having a free hour of consulting. Here's your homework assignment, and maybe one of you can pop up a question now because this is going to take some thought. But if you could, in an anonymous fashion, ask the questions to us that are very specific to you. So, you know, what was Steve Martin's famous line? I was raised a poor child in the South, and now, now I couldn't spell professor, and now I are one. But if you want to think about questions of a nature that, again, I emphasize anonymity because the nature of M&As is it's a confidential transactional environment. But if you have a question specific to you, I'm 62. I have high blood pressure. I can only work half days. I'd like to get some value and a job out of it. Those are very, very helpful to us. And again, I think we have about a minute left. If we can pop one of those, I didn't set the table super good for that, and I will make the next webinar. I'll make that understood up front that you need to come with your questions specific to you, and we will endeavor to answer those as long as we don't cross the yellow line on legalities and taxation and some other things. With that said, Tim, we are at 1 o'clock, so I am going to respect that deadline. Why don't you put a wrapper on today, and we're going to reconvene next week for an hour of free consulting.
Well, simply put, you know, we dove into the pool not knowing if it was a foot deep or 10 feet deep, and we did it because you reached out to us and said I could sure use this. You being the community, and you know, after a lot of calls and some serious conversations, there is absolutely value and a way forward for the entrepreneur on this call. There's relationships there that are ready in either direction. So the good news is it has not turned into a neat idea that didn't translate. It appears to be translating. So more to follow. Can't write, I can't write the white paper on it yet, but I can sure tell you that the marketing requirements document could be written because there's definitely traction in both directions. And that would be what I know today, and I'm going to give it to you unfiltered until you can't stand it anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you'll do that. I'll give you that, Tim. So with that said, folks, 4 p.m. today on Bainbridge Island, the 16th annual picnic. Check our webpage if you want details and want to drop by. Tour to Cloud starts in about 6 weeks out in the Midwest. So tourtocloud.com, Azure 365. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week. Jenny, thanks as always. Let's bring this one home and land this jet plane. Thank you, folks. Have a great day.